are back. 7:29 p.m. We got about a half an hour before we got to get out of here. Rev, you said you enjoyed the Lupe fiasco.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to add that to my YouTube music list.
So I consider that a win.
Yes.
Lupe's a guy who, like I said, very interesting guy, very devout Muslim, somebody who has made a lot of really great, thoughtful music over the last 15 or so years. He's somebody who takes his position as a voice of his generation very personal, without being too preachy or being too much of a scold, but and as nobody can doubt the lyrical skill of Mr. Fiasco. He's one of the greats that whoever did it. But Rev, back to Gary, Indiana, the greatest city in all the world.
So what about Gary should we talk about today? Of course,
the Senate has approved that a state-appointed school board for Gary. So it looks like I won't have to play "One Day It Will Be Ours, It Will Be Ours" for much longer.
Not much longer.
Not much longer. I'm gonna have to play the John Legend.
Next year, it will be ours.
Yes, it will be ours. Yes.
At least more so ours.
Yes, the Indiana Senate overwhelmingly agreed on Tuesday that the future leadership of the Gary Community School Corporation should begin with a state-appointed school board. The Republican-controlled chamber voted along party lines, 40-9, to advance Senate Bill 327, sponsored by Senators Ryan Mishler, Republican of Mishawaka, and Ed Charbonneau, Republican of Valparaiso, to the Republican-controlled House for a decision in the weeks ahead on sending it to the governor to be signed into law. This proposal reestablishes a school board in Gary, Indiana, on July 1st, 2023, whose 7 members would be appointed entirely by the Indiana Secretary of Education, Katie Jenner, who was appointed to her post in 2020 by Governor Holcomb. This new board initially would be tasked with advising the district's emergency manager. It would take full control, including the power to appoint a superintendent, on July 1st, 2024, so next year, or a subsequent date when the Indiana Distress Unit Appeals Board certifies that Gary schools no longer are financially distressed. Under this plan, 5 of the school board members would be directly appointed by the Secretary of Education. The other 2 would be appointed by her, but from a list of 6 candidates recommended by Gary's mayor. At least 2 board members would have to live in Gary. 2 live in either Gary or Lake County, and the other 3 can be from anywhere. In addition to running Gary schools, the board would be obligated to report on the district's finances, operations, academics, and the effectiveness of the governing structure to the State Budget Committee by the end of 2026, so that the 2027 General Assembly could decide whether the time is right to move toward a locally elected school board. That's exciting. State Senator Eddie Melton, a candidate for mayor, said that the people of Gary are ready right now to run their school district, and that he's disappointed his proposal in Senate Bill 436 to immediately elect the new Gary School Board failed to advance. At the same time, Melton says he recognizes this appointed school board merely is meant to transition the district from state control to local control, and he's just glad the end of unprecedented state takeover is in sight. Melton said he hopes the new school board prioritizes academics alongside finances, though he also urged lawmakers to consider forgiving the district's estimated $35 million in Indiana Common School Funds loans to put Gary's district on the strongest possible financial footing as it reemerges as an independent entity. Now, it's important to remember, Gary schools were taken over by the state 6 years ago, and its prior elected school board dissolved after it spent $21.5 million more than the district took in and racked up $103 million in debt. Frequently struggled to make payroll, stiffed vendors, routinely failed to remit tax payments withheld from employees' checks to the IRS, and fell more than $3 million behind on paying employee health insurance premiums. After relentless cost cutting and right sizing by a state appointed emergency manager, along with the extra financial resources obtained through a successful voter referendum in 2020, Gary schools have a $1.3 million annual operating surplus and paid off all but $66 million in debt. And the district has a 5-year financial plan in place to maintain solvency and stability. Rev, this is exciting news.
Yeah, as long as you don't. Well, you know what? It's all in how you look at it.
Right.
For example, you can either look at it and say, well, gee, only 2 of the members of the 7-person board are guaranteed to be Gary residents.
How I was looking at it. Yeah.
On the other hand, you could look at it as 4 of the 7 board members are either from Gary or Lake County. Mm-hmm. Okay, which means only 3 are outsiders. Which means the 4 Lake County people could gang up,
on the 3
all the time. Right. And if the 3 are scattered from various corners of the state, it's even more likely that the 4 from Lake County will always gang up on the 3.
Right.
But a bigger issue is about the money. Mm-hmm. Because as it stands, the bill that was also available for debate would have had the state assembly kick some money into Gary's coffers to pay off. Well, not put it in Gary's coffers, because they would just say, okay, we're going to forgive this money that you all owe, which would free up more money to go into the classroom. As it now stands, those bills are still there, and so they have to take some of the money that comes from what they receive per student, and they have to use some of that money to pay off the debt. Well, of course, Indianapolis loves the fact that they operate with a budget surplus each year, because it allows them to send us a check of about $100, and so we think more nicely of Indianapolis as a result. They gave us some money. But that also means that, well, Gary will spend the next 2 or 3 years consistently paying down that debt, so that in 2027, the state legislature can say, yep, they're on track. You can have your board back.
Yeah, I really agree ultimately that getting the board back in the hands of Gary people. Now, I agree with you when you said the 4 of the 7 will have to be from Lake County, and they may gang up on the people from the other places. One thing I do question though is where, like, Lake County, obviously Gary, East Chicago, Hammond has very similar politics, but South Lake County is a little bit different. So for me, I would have rather seen there be at least 4 members from Gary. Mm-hmm. 4 members have to be from Gary, and then maybe have 2 be from the rest of Lake County, and then have somebody else from the rest
from anywhere.
From anywhere else, because 3 people from anywhere else, like that could be Crawfordsville, that could be South Bend, that could be Indianapolis. Like, those people have nothing to do with our culture here in Gary.
Yeah.
Like our part of the state is unique to us. I always tell people, whenever I tell people I'm from Gary, I say, pretty much we're in the Chicagoland area. That's how we pretty much think of ourselves. We're right across the border. Mm-hmm. We're 20, 30 minutes away. We have a lot more in common culturally and politically with them than we do with the rest of the state.
Lake. Yeah.
And so it's,
like I said, clearly this board will have to learn how to do politics. Nothing can be assumed on the basis of pure number crunching. If the contingent from the area wants to ensure that, no Indianapolis policies are put into place that work against the students of Gary, then the 2 Gary residents cannot go onto that board viewing everyone else as their enemy.
Yeah.
They've got to go into that board thinking, okay, how can we get these people to work with us?
Right. You're right. And that culture change, I mean, to say that culture difference could make a difference. One thing I always question is, how are we going to get good teachers to want to come to Gary?
Well, money. It doesn't hurt.
Well, yeah,
I mean, because right now, Gary's teachers are the highest paid teachers in the region.
Right.
And so the other cities like Hammond, East Chicago, had to bring their salaries up to match Gary's. I believe it was East Chicago. I'm not sure about Hammond, but East Chicago had to give their teachers raises to match Gary. Because Gary was getting the most, their teachers were getting paid the most for base salary out of any of the school districts in the region.
Right. And outside of just money, the environment, because you would hear all these horror stories before about teachers not getting paid, and a lot of, and even at Westside, remember we just had the strike last year that the girl was supposed to come on our show. I forget what her name was. I don't want to put her name on blast, but she ended up ditching us. She didn't end up calling in or coming in. But at Westside, the conditions of that school, like the level of they said lack of toilet paper in the bathrooms, holes in the walls, and
you can offer all the money in the world, but if the environment is stressful, it may not be enough money.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, what do we as Gary, Indiana, have to offer educators?
I guess I could say perhaps the opportunity to really make a positive impact. I think that most teachers coming out of college go into education because they want to make a positive difference in the lives of young people. I think it takes a while. It's, just like not your bully cops, but your idealistic cops. It takes a while to beat all that idealism out of a person who's got that sort of mentality. It takes a lot of brutality to beat that out of them. And so, it takes a while to turn a teacher into somebody who's just, collecting a paycheck, counting the days till retirement, and I'm just trying to stay under the radar and just survive till I get to my retirement phase. I can collect my money. It takes a while to get there. So I think, and don't forget now, if you teach in a public school setting in an area like Gary for, I don't remember how many years it is, maybe 7. I have to look that up. But if you teach for a long enough period of time, your student loans get forgiven.
Really?
So that's an incentive.
Yeah, wow, that is a good incentive on some level.
And add that to the fact that there is, as far as I know, there is no law in the books that requires Gary teachers to live in Gary.
There isn't?
Nope.
Right. Okay. So that that is true, because a lot of my teachers when I was at Emerson did not live in Gary.
So just think, you don't have to live here. You get paid as much as any other teacher in the region. And you have the opportunity to work off your student loan debt without having to, take any money from anything else.
Right, and we have to be solid. We have to be solid this time. A lot of teachers got jerked around under the old system. A lot of times the payroll. They struggled to
make payroll.
Yeah, they struggled to make payroll, and a lot of the vendors didn't get their money at the schools. Things like that matter.
Yeah,
you don't want Gary, Indiana, to get the reputation of being a Bush League, school system, or a city in general. Like, we have enough things working against us. There's still always the residue of, the murder capital of the world. From when I was growing up, we just talked about original gangsters a few minutes ago, and I remember during that era, it was just, living in Gary. You told people you lived in Gary, they'd be like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, I know.
Are
you gonna be okay?
Are you gonna be okay? Or they wouldn't want to know you. I used to tell people I was from Maryville because my sister lived in Maryville. Whenever I put in job applications and stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to tell people I was from Gary when I was putting in job applications a lot of times because it was like, oh my God, this is, and so people, it's the same thing when people have to work in Gary. Like when people tell people they work in Gary, Indiana,
they look at them with pity. Huh?
Yeah, they like, oh my God, and we don't want that anymore. A lot of people don't know that Gary used to have some of the best schools in the whole country.
Yeah.
Like we had some of the best schools in the whole country. William A. Wirt was considered one of the great educators of the 20th century. And you had a lot of the Gary, Indiana method of teaching being taught around the country.
That's correct.
So can we get back to that? Can we get back to being one of the best school systems in the world? Is that solely on the school board and teachers and schools, or is that some of that has to do with us as the citizens?
That's a good question, because a large measure of the school's reputation is really carried by the students when they go off to college.
Yep.
When they set foot on that college campus, and if they don't have to take a bunch of remedial education courses, and they sort of flow smoothly through the college system, that's bound to increase the stature of the school district that they came from.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Emerson in the late 90s and the early 2000s, the kids who would graduate and they'd go down to college, because we didn't have the internet at Emerson yet at this point. We had just got the internet the year I graduated in the school, and I remember a lot of kids, young people coming back from college that first year over Christmas break and being like, dude, we were totally not prepared when we went to Indiana State or IU or whatever college we went to. We were totally not prepared, and there's a whole lot of stuff we were behind in. And that scared the crap out of all of us, in school at that point. Like, oh man. And I remember all the other schools in Gary outside of Emerson lost their accreditation. During the 90s, and I think it was either late 90s or early 2000s when they lost their accreditation. And like stuff like that hurts a community's reputation. But also, not having parent engagement, I think hurts in this situation as well. Hurts the type of reputation of a school district and a community as well, because the perception is Gary parents don't care.
Yeah. And that kind of comes from the parents' interaction with teachers. It comes from when teachers feel like they're not getting the support when they plan events and activities for the parents and the parents don't show up for it. When they try to connect with the parents to, discuss some issue pertaining to their child, and the parent, is so defensive that, there is no collaboration. And then the teachers talk to each other.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they absolutely do. And so it is important that we don't just say, look, we're getting our school system back, let's let them happen. This is a community effort. That especially parents, you can't just depend on the school to be the only ones raise your kids. That's what you always talk about on here. Like, you can't just depend on other people to raise your kids, basically to teach your kids. You got to, do a lot of educating yourself.
I mean, because at the end of the day, they represent you, parents. No, but when your kid gets in trouble, no one is gonna say, "Man, look what was his teachers doing?"
Yeah.
No one ever says that.
Nope.
They always go, "What was they mama and daddy doing?" You know, I remember when we were growing up, parents used to say that to us. Don't you go doing, whatever, because you ain't gonna have them folk talking bad about us. And like we understood that the worst thing we could possibly do is get in trouble because the powers that be were gonna be talking about our mama and our daddy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, to the extent that parents forgot that their first and foremost job is to equip these little children to represent the family.
Yep.
And how do you want them representing your family?
I agree. Well, Rev, we got to go to a break and then we're getting out of here.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in.
Yes. Please stick with us here on WLTH 1370 AM. We got to go to a break. And when we come back, we will be mopping up